Giving People Alternatives by Nick Reed. Nick Reed is a founder and owner of Frontier Liberty, a solution-based online resource providing tools for solving problems without government or which have been created by it. Reed is also a media coordinator for the Libertarian Party of Texas, as well as a speaker, writer, lifelong surfer, strong advocate for achieving liberty through the political as well as non-political wings of the liberty movement.
All right. So some of the things that I wanted to talk about today are giving people alternatives. Now, what does that mean? I titled the name of this talk, Giving People Alternatives, because I feel that it's not enough in the liberty movement to just be fighting the man without giving people alternatives to the man. You see, when I hear people say, I don't have a right to privacy, I'm not a criminal, I'm not a drug dealer, I don't have anything to hide, what I really hear is, I don't know where to start. I don't have any clue what I would use besides Gmail or something like that. And that's just one example. But I have begun a resource called Frontier Liberty, and the website is frontierliberty.com. And I created this resource to give people alternatives. Alternatives to some of the ways that we do things today that I feel are very hostile to liberty. Can we take this down? Just because I don't think it has anything to do with what I'm saying. Great. Thanks. Also, because I want you to look at me, because this is something that's very personal to me. It's something I'm very passionate about. And I like to connect to the audience as well, and it's good when I can see your eyes. So, a few years ago, I was masquerading around Sweden teaching conversational English classes and secretly doing little social experiments and workshops that I kind of cross-checked with students and people here in the United States. But there's one really interesting workshop that I want to mention because it highlights something very telling about where we're at today. I told a class, today we're going to change the world. So get into groups. All right. Now identify something that you want to see change in the world. Okay? And then you're going to outline the best plan to make it happen. And let me tell you what I heard. I heard a lot of, well, we think that the president or the prime minister should do this, or that the schools should stop that, the FDA this, God that, which is great, but it's all top-down solutions. And at the end of the day, nobody has anything that they can walk out the door and do. And I think that this is very telling of where we're at today, because the way that we're approaching problem solving is through further consolidation and centralization of power, which I think is very disempowering. It's very disempowering for a couple of reasons. One, because 500 and something people in Washington, D.C. cannot solve all of the problems of 340 million people across a continent that they've never met and don't know anything about. They don't know who you are. It's just science. Another thing is I think that people enjoy having a meaningful role in their community and the lives of people around them. That I think is kind of robbed of us when we subjugate away all of our creative capacity to solve problems ourselves and all of our niche knowledge that we all have about our local communities to people across a continent. And in the future, maybe across the world as we head toward a world government. I believe that let me tell you another. So, who watches movies? Do you like the movies like Lord of the Rings, where Frodo embarks on some journey that he doesn't know if he can come back on, where there's something that needs to be done that only he can do, and he overcomes all risk and adversity and challenge, and in the face of all wrongful accusation and everything, he does what he believes in, and we watch our favorite actors and actresses all day act out what real meaning and purpose looks like in a fictional storyline. But I'm here today to tell you that I think that the greatest opportunity for meaning and purpose exists within the fabric of this moment, and we just don't recognize it. So, the organization and the resource that I've been working on, the purpose of it is to equip and enable people access to tools that can help defend or enhance your liberty, decrease dependency on present systems, and help people solve problems through the free market rather than bigger government. For so long, we've been solving problems through regulation that now we're going to hit a problem. You see, now we have more laws than the laws of physics, with taxes and fees and licenses for everything from being born to catching a fish. And if we keep going, we're going to red tape ourselves into a corner. So, not more than a couple weeks ago, in my hometown of Austin, Texas, I went down to try and battle City Council about the Uber, Lyft, and taxi battle. But what I realized is it's not really a battle between Uber and Lyft and the taxis. It's a battle between a government-enforced monopoly and the free market. And one of the things that occurred to me when I was debating with a gentleman outside of it was that there is a central dogma that we have in not just in government but in our society, because we have such a top-down way of thinking, that is sort of a central dogma of human evilness. It's a belief that people are just too lazy, stupid, or evil to get along and take care of themselves without being controlled or regulated. And the guy that I was talking to went as far as to call humanity a virus, a gentleman who worked for the city. This is very telling about where we're at. But I believe that it's not, when we look at all the things that he described, look what we're doing to our environment, look what we do to each other. I don't think that this is people's nature, and that that's why we need government and control and regulation to fix this flaw of humanity. I believe that that's what people look like when they're in a coercive and controlling and manipulative environment that not only is not conducive to the kind of flourishing and goodness that humanity is capable of, but is in fact probably its greatest obstacle and hindrance. You see, they say that money makes the world go round. Well, the other half of that is you have the coercion. You have the stick and the carrot, right? And you can see this with bulls and bears and manipulating interest rates and economic stimulus packages, and you can see it in school with good grades and bad grades. But this is how we relate to each other in our socio-political systems that we call government and we call the banking system. But really, in reality, there's no banks, there's no schools, there's no government. It's four walls and a bunch of people. But how are we relating to each other through these systems and through these institutions that we've given names? I think that there's a big discrepancy between the way that we relate to each other in our personal lives and the way that we relate to each other through our socioeconomic systems. I'll give you an example. You see a kid in the lunch line who is, you know, the bully beating up Johnny for his lunch money, right? You stop it. Hey, you stop that. You know, that's Johnny's money. He can give it to you if he wants to, but it's not yours to take, okay? And then you say the IRS, and people shrivel up. Oh, well, you got to pay your taxes, right? That's the discrepancy. And if you saw somebody in a relationship that, let's say somebody said, no, you can't get a divorce. You don't have, you'd be like, okay, come on now, look, relationships are only good when they're voluntary and they're healthy. But try getting a divorce from any government agency or institution that we have in our socio-political systems. You see the discrepancy? Here's the problem. The problem is freedom is completely inseparable from human nature. It is. When a deer is born, it can basically take off on a sprint, right? When a bug is born, it has all of its instinct, its programming, its action patterns, inherited. It's hereditary. When we're born, we are the most helpless creature on the face of the earth. And that is because we relate to our world completely different. We relate through freedom. We can choose how we respond to the world. Our action patterns are not complete at birth. It is who we are, and it is what we do best. So when we talk about solving problems through regulation and government and coercion versus the free market, I think that the free market is really the best way that we should be doing things in society. And not only that, but when people do things freely, it's a gift. It's a gift. When people do things when it's coerced, it's expected. Or when it's manipulated, it's not a gift. Imagine your friend was a robot and he gives you a flower, right? And it's your robot. Can you appreciate that? Is that a gift? Or is he just doing it because it's his programming? You see what I'm saying? And this is how we relate to each other. When things are a gift, because everything is a gift. Every breath you take is a gift. Every step you take is a gift, right? It's not just what people do, but everything that people do is a gift. And to be surrounded by gifts should feel rich. Rich like people try and fill that hole in their chest with so much power and education and quantity and money of everything that you just can't fill that bottomless pit with any quantity of anything. I think that the way that we relate to each other is a real obstacle to the kind of quality of life that I would like to see. The way that we relate to each other, really, is more like you relate to an object. I would go so far as to say. An object is not self-directing, not self-organizing. It doesn't have any intrinsic value in itself. It's completely controlled and manipulated by things outside of it, right? And if you throw a phone on the ground and stomp on it because it doesn't do what you want, you're not going to feel like an abuser or a murderer. It's an object, right? It doesn't have any intrinsic value apart from what it means to you. When we relate to each other this way, we run into a problem because people are not objects. And there's going to be a point at which we're not going to be able to continue getting people to do things without their own reason for doing it. There's not going to be a sweet enough carrot or a big enough stick to keep people doing it. Control is like a drug. You build a tolerance to it because nobody enjoys being controlled or manipulated. It's just not fun. It's not a gift. It's not rich. And we're going to hit a wall, a big wall. Because our need for autonomy is like our need for food. If you don't get your need for food met, it does not go away. It grows stronger, right? You get hungrier. Now we can see our need for food. It's physically manifest in our body. We have a mouth, we have teeth, we have tongue, you know what I'm saying? Intestines. But your need for freedom, it's not so visible. But it's just as real. You can experience it. You can feel it in your chest. You can feel it when you pay your taxes. You can feel it when you have to do all of the things that you don't want to do, but you do to avoid a consequence or to get a reward. This builds like a tidal wave and grows stronger and stronger. And historically, it's resulted in big, giant lashing outs and violent uprisings and revolts and revolutions, and now we see global terrorism on the rise. Where is that possibly coming from? Historically, we have not been able to see this tidal wave coming of our unmet need for freedom, and it has taken us like a thief in the night, kicking and screaming the whole way. But where we have failed historically, I think that now we can succeed, and maybe secede too. What we need is to see that wave coming and to ride it in a productive productive direction. And I'll tell you right now, as a lifelong surfer, if there's one thing I'm good at, it's seeing waves coming and riding them. But we're going to need the tools to do it. Because you can't change systems if you are dependent on the very systems you're trying to change. And the resource I'm trying to create is to address that, and to address the top-down thinking, to give people alternatives. But it's not just for me to give people alternatives. It's to give you a place where you can go to give people alternatives. And I've chosen 5 of the most major, egregious, systemic abuses that I see going on within the United States. And that is, 1, privacy, which we have Edward Snowden here to talk about today, which would be great. That's warrantless surveillance and wiretapping. It doesn't matter if it's a piece of information or the beating heart in your chest. What you give to other people is to be a gift. It is not to be taken without consent. Legal empowerment tools. And this is because of the downward legal mobilization of the individual within our criminal justice system, who today can represent themselves in court. All right. Yes. That's really encouraging, actually. But the vast majority of people are not. You need a lawyer to navigate the legal system, just like you need a CPA to do your taxes, and you need a mechanic to work on a modern car. The complexity of the world that we live in, as we're so materially and technically over-advanced, is overwhelming. And so I've put together legal empowerment tools to protect your rights, which unfortunately I don't have time to go into a lot of examples, but I have an exhibition booth. I'll be showcasing a few of these tools. Self-reliance tools. What is this? This is food, water, housing, and energy independence. Why is this important? Because when we have a third of the nation, 340 million people, a third of that, dependent on the government for even basic necessities they need for survival, that is a high state of dependency that is very hostile to liberty. We also have alternative education and independent media resources, which Snowden can speak to. But we have a very hegemonic propaganda that promotes a very top-down way of thinking in our school system and in our mainstream media that's very hostile to liberty. It's no different than the myth that you find in the creation myth of the Abrahamic religions that says, if you eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good, the knowledge of good and evil yourself, you shall surely die. Now, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater about religion entirely, you know, when is it ever bad for you to know for yourself what's right and what's wrong and what's good and what's bad and what's healthy and what's not? That is only a problem if you want to have people doing things that they know are going to be bad or harmful or not healthy to themselves and their environment. And it's easy if you want to use the capacity of human nature to defy gravity and to alter genetic codes and fly without wings and all of the things that we're able to do without the limitations of a moral conscience. Then it's great. But I think that we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. And I think that the way that we relate to each other is going to bring out the worst in humanity. And I'd really like to see that change. How should I wrap this up? I believe in each one of you. And I believe that we can change things. And we don't have to rely on the majority to do it. There's a big myth that you have to change the world. Because you know what? If everybody's trying to change the world, it just promotes the same top-down way of thinking that we've been subjected to our entire lives. Changing your world should be enough. And in fact, if everybody did that, the whole world would change. And you know, when you think about it, in our culture, it's very difficult for some of the really important truths to break to the surface, to find their crack to come through all of the nonsense. But if you ask people who they're on their deathbed, or you ask people who had a close call and near-death experience, what's most important to you after you have almost lost your life? That's where you can really find some insights. And you know what? Personally, for me, big questions like, where did we come from and where do we go after we die and stuff, none of that matters. I figured this out while I was looking up at the sky one night, and I saw this meteor come streaking through, and then it just left. And it was just there for a brief second. And I thought, that's it. That's the answer for me. That's the meaning of life for me. I don't know where I come from or where I'm going after I leave this world, but while I'm here, I'm going to light up the sky. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you for the presentation.
Thanks for having me.